So have you ever been in the situation where you just never have enough cash for the things that you want to do or the things you want to buy, and they keep coming up over and over again, and every time it happens, you have no cash? Thanks for joining me today on my channel. This is Discovering My Money, and we're in the series about budgeting. So what I want to talk about today with budgeting is basically envelope stuffing. Well, envelopes would be the old school way of it, but because of electronics now, we can just have a whole bunch of accounts, put cash into each one of those accounts, and give them a specific name so that we only use it for those purposes. I was recently talking to a friend of mine, and she was wanting to go to her son's swim meet, but she found that she was cash strapped and she couldn't afford to do it. So she was kind of upset about it. And so we talked about, just briefly, I mentioned, for the future, you can do envelope stuffing as part of your budget, and therefore when this happens again where you have an event to go to, you'll already have cash saved. So what I want to do next is I just want to take a moment here and show you how that would work. So you set up your basic budget, you have what cash flow you have set up. If you don't have any cash flow, of course you have to go through from the previous video and narrow that down and create cash flow, or at least a $0 expense, and start paying off all your debt. Once you have more cash flow, you can start putting your extra cash into the different envelopes. Let's go take a look. All right, so if you remember when we started with our budget, we went into the income and expenses side. On each one of those, we had two parts. We went fixed and variable. So this is all in a previous video. If you haven't seen it, you can go back and check it out, but both sides basically go fixed and a variable. Now within that, we figured out we wanted to come up with how much our total income was, how much our total expenses were. We had the different columns so that we could figure out how we wanted to reduce our expenses and try and increase our incomes. So we came up with these numbers, and then they came down to here and gave us our either positive or negative cash flow. So that's where we were in the previous video. So positive and negative cash flow needs to be, we need to get rid of that, and we need to focus on getting positive cash flow, obviously. Once we've set up our positive cash flow, we can then take our cash and divide it into different areas. Now, when I'm talking positive cash flow, all of our income is added up, and we've now made sure all of our fixed income is set, so we have that checked off. Variable incomes, we've allotted ourselves so much to spend, and that's where we've started creating our budget. So we know that we can only spend X amount on whatever type of variable expense, like entertainment, for example, that we have that we are going to allow ourselves to spend. That leaves us with, hopefully, a positive cash flow, all right? Positive cash flow essentially is the money we have left over after all of our expenses are done and we've taken into account all our income and expenses, leaving us with the remainder. Okay, so as I was talking about with my friend, she has an area here where she wants to go see her son's swim meet, but was short on cash. So she wants to, do stuff with her kids. So we're going to make a separate account for that. So in the old days, you could just have an envelope and you'd actually put cash, right? Just take cash and put it right in the envelope. But now with electronics, we can actually take it from our main account and we can just transfer it over to this account. Now that is a little bit troublesome because some people are not good at that. So instead of putting it in the envelope, it just goes out the door because they just keep dipping into these funds. So if you're really bad at that and you have no self-control, and that's fine because I can relate to that myself, you basically want to eliminate this from happening. If you can't control yourself, take it out of this account, put it in an envelope. There you go. So you've got it figured out. I've even heard people who go so far with their credit cards, they'll put them in a bin of water and then freeze the bin of water so they can't just have that urge to go and use their credit cards. That seems a little extreme, but whatever works for you. Now, if you're going to go to this, put it in the envelope method, and I actually use a form of this myself, you're going to want to have some other things set up, and we're going to go emergency. So the emergency fund is, well, for instance, if you lose your job, you're going to have money that you can spend on your everyday expenses, right? So this is actually going to go up here instead of the income that's no longer coming in. So you're going to have this covered. Now, some would say that emergency fund should be 3 to 6 months of your income, or what you need to cover your expenses. So it might not cover entertainment, but it'd cover a portion of it, like say your cable or whatever it is that you use to watch TV or streaming. Those types of things, you might still want to have that much entertainment, right? But it may not include travel or other things that are a little bit beyond your everyday living. Now, emergency fund is good, and that should really be allotted really to emergency for taking the place of income. Now, here's the thing. You also maybe want to have a rainy day fund for things like, let's go dishwasher, right? Dishwasher goes down, your air conditioner, right? So these things are things you might want to have in that rainy day fund. Well, just an N, rainy day, okay? So all the things that can go on in here could be substantial. Now, hopefully they wouldn't happen all at one time, but you might want to have anywhere between 3 and 5K just to cover things like that easily. And so 3 to 5K might seem a little extreme. You can put it to as small as you want, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 2,000, but there definitely should be something in here over and above what your emergency fund is, which is to cover your expenses in the event of job loss or injury or whatever, so just in case you can't work. Now, here's where you can go even a step further. So you got this one covered off for your kids. You've started your emergency fund. You're building that. Your rainy day fund is building up. Hopefully you don't have any interruptions in these while you're building them. You can get them to the point where you feel comfortable. And then you can go into things like vacation fund. Vacation funds are just fun times, and they're not stuff that you're actually saving for or actually working on, like paying off debt or working on your retirement fund. So this could be an extra piece there. You can also set the vacation fund up based on what type of vacations you want to go on. And of course, that would mean that you're putting more in if you're going on a fancier trip, or if you're going to do a whole bunch of small trips and then a big trip, you can do stuff like that. So for instance, you could save, let's say, 5,000 a year. For your small trips, you're only going to try and spend 3,000 or less, right? So that's what I guess that's the other way around, and that's negative. So you're going to save an extra 2,000 a year. And then you do that big trip where you've got an extra 2,000 a year saved up over 4 years, plus your 5,000, you've got a $9,000 trip you can now do. That's going to make a big difference. You can manage that vacation trip a lot differently, but of course you can put certain amount towards it each year, and then you have cash flow for that specific reason, right? So you can see. Now here's the thing with the accounts nowadays is if you go to the right bank, you can get interest in your account. So check out my link below. I'm getting 4% savings on the accounts that I'm using. So I have my main account where all my income goes into, and then I have 3 different savings accounts, and I'm getting 4% interest. This is annually, right? This is not daily or monthly. It's not like crazy cash, but 4% is a decent amount, which is slightly better than inflation right now, I believe, or in about that range. Usually inflation's, they're trying to keep it around that 2.5%, I believe. Governments have those objectives, but it's been a little higher lately. But if you're getting 4%, that means you're doing all right. So you're getting a little bit of interest on these savings accounts as opposed to the old banks where they just put them in there and they essentially give you, I don't know, like 0.5%. So it's not even 1%. It's quite a bit different. So if you could do that, you're good. Now, if you have no control and you just spend the money that's in these accounts, yes, putting in an envelope is good. And so you're going to take them and put them in a cash envelope. And so somebody's going to say to you, well, that's no good because inflation is wrecking it for you. Well, the amount of inflation you're going to have, if you're saving for your kids, you probably have an event with your kids, hell, even monthly. You might have an event with your kids, say, 3-4 times a year. and the amount of inflation that's going to affect you is kind of marginal, except for how it was here after COVID. It was pretty high there for a little while, and everything went up extreme. But saving cash in an envelope for 2, 3, 6, even a year, like 12 months is really, it's going to be marginal, right? And the thing is, you want to have that cash there, and the amount of inflation is still less that you're losing, right? Still less than if you end up putting it on a credit card and then taking a full year to pay it off. If you're putting money on a credit card, you're going to have that, what is it, 20%-ish? So you're going to go anywhere between 18.99 up to 23% or 22.99. So we'll just say 20 for a nice round number. This is, of course, annual again. So you can say just below 2% per month, right? So this is 4% a year, what you're gaining. Inflation is usually about 2.5, we'll say. We'll just say that because it's fluctuated so much recently, but we're just going to say roughly that's what the government's shooting for. And you're earning 4%. If you put it on your credit card, it's 20%. That's a great reason to stuff it in an envelope and not have it in this account where you can't save it, right? So who cares if you lose the 4%? Who cares if inflation is 2.5%, because the credit card is 20%, and that is just, that just kind of makes me sick just even talking about it. Okay, so the next thing is the emergency fund. Now, the emergency fund it's really something you don't touch. Essentially, you leave it there until you have enough money in your pension that you're pulling out your pension, and it's not going away. Now, emergency fund should probably be there just in case something happens, but this emergency fund here is like a no-go. So this is like a black hole, right? It's like a black hole. It's like out in space. It's sucking everything, and it's not coming back. It's your money. It's your accounts. You of course have control of it, but you never want to touch this money, and you definitely want to have it someplace where it's maybe getting that 4% interest. And the reason being is then you're either growing it or you're earning money from it just sitting there. And that if you're not investing, at least it's not kind of losing value, right? But losing your job and then having no money here, if this is at zero, you're in trouble. So the emergency funds, 3 to 6 months worth. I would shoot for 6 months. My experience is that 3 months just doesn't quite cut it. And 6 months may be too much, but if you're getting a decent interest, you can kind of feel like at least it's not sitting there losing value. And if you don't know about how interest works, I'm going to do another video in the future about how interest and inflation kind of need to work hand in hand so that you're not losing value on your cash, because essentially the cost of goods keeps going up. So $1 is worth less every day, right? So for instance, you could hardly buy anything with $1 anymore. Whereas like when I was a kid, you go to the store with $1 and you'd come out with a lot of candy, right? So kids nowadays, they need to go in with a 5 or a 10 just to get something. That's a different story. We can reminisce and complain about how things have changed on another video, but let's go to the rainy day fund. Now, the rainy day fund is essentially that same type of thing. And if you can be getting this 4% interest here as well, you're going to find that you're going to go through things. Especially if you own a home or you have an apartment where you have to do any kind of replacements. Like if you're in a rental, maybe all this stuff is taken care of. So rainy day fund doesn't need to be as big, but you start adding up all the things that can be or need to be replaced, or things that can go wrong in a house. I mean, dishwasher, air conditioner, that's not a big thing. What about your roof? Your roof starts leaking. That's a big one. That's going to be a buddy's going through that right now. Replacing his roof is going to cost him thousands of dollars, right? So you got to go through and replace all these things that may happen, and having a rainy day fund that's actually earning you interest, it's not a bad deal. And you're going to find that these things are going to pop up, right? So if you made a list, it's going to be fairly extensive. It's probably easily 10 things, if not 20, that you're going to want to have on this list covered. And you're not going to necessarily try and cover all of them, but the more you have on your list, the more you want to cover. So you have 10 things on your list, you probably want to have, $3,000 to $4,000 available, especially if they're bigger ones like a roof, where it could cost you 10 grand. Coming up with 10 grand, you only have 3 grand, you're still short, right? So you might want to maybe pump that one up depending on where you think that's going. Or if you know your roof replacement is coming up in a year or two, you might want to pump that up and get a bit more in there. Now, if you just have a condo and you just got to replace things like dishwasher, washer, dryer, air conditioner, things like that, or whatever that are your responsibility, you may only need that $1,000 to $2,000, and as they pop up, you just take some cash out, and so on and so forth. Now, the number you decide to go with, I would still be 3 to 5K minimum, right? So apartment, home, that's an A, believe it or not. So if you're in an apartment, maybe 3K, home 5K, and I would definitely be looking upwards depending on, if you live a little bit more luxurious and the stuff you have to replace is going to cost more, you're of course going to want to increase those numbers. The bigger the house, of course, like for instance, the roof, the bigger the house, the bigger the roof, the more cost it's going to be. So these things all can be variable depending on, what it is you have to cover. And then of course, vacation fund. Now, vacation fund, you're probably only holding funds there for a year because you probably want to go on a vacation every year. Now, if you can't afford that, maybe you're planning for 2-3 years, but you're still looking at a fair bit of money. As far as like the 4%, it's going to cover the inflation. Inflation isn't going to be that big a deal over 1 to 2 years. You start holding it for 4 to 5 years, yes, it's going to start to add up. But if you have it in an account making 4%, you're probably doing okay. You're at least staying par. You're not getting a lot. If you're putting investment money in here, you're not going to really gain anything. It's just what you put in there. Essentially, you're not going to stay ahead as far as value goes. So value with inflation, value goes down. So $100 today, is equal to $105 2 years from now, right? So what you can buy today with $100, you're probably only going to be able to buy the same amount, no more, with $105. And that's just kind of a rough guesstimate. If inflation is at 2.5%, and that's annual, and of course, different items increase at different rates, and we all know that for sure. Different things become more expensive. I just was talking to a friend the other day, and he noted that, bananas haven't gone up in price. So as far as bananas goes, when you're the consumer, price hasn't changed, where other things have seemingly doubled in price. And so that is really kind of troublesome depending on what it is you're buying. Now, if you only eat bananas, you're not really affected by inflation. But if you have the thing that's doubled in price and it goes 2 times, and that's the thing you buy the most of, you're probably in a little bit of money trouble. So you might have to redo your whole budget and start over, and definitely your expenses are going to have to be realigned. Okay, so that's it. Well, again, just to recap, income, expenses, you want to make sure you have positive cash flow. So that means your income is higher than your expenses. If it's not, then you have to go through and definitely change your variable expenses, right? So variable expenses need to come down. If you can, change your fixed expenses, come up with positive cash flow. With that, you're going to take either you're going to get some separate accounts, or you're actually going to put them into envelopes for cash, and you're going to create your different spots for things that you want to do. And the whole story started with what you need to do with your kids. So if you or your kids are involved in stuff and you need to travel or you need to go do stuff with them, you want to make sure that is being filled up so you have cash when you need it. The second one here, of course, was the emergency. And as I said, that's 3 to 6 months of income, and that's to replace your income, right? Now, everyone thinks this isn't going to happen, but if you have that extra cash there, you're going to sleep a lot easier at night, no matter what the situation, because you have extra cash. Then, of course, you are going to have this one here, and we call this the rainy day. The rainy day fund is really what you want to have it, but 3 to 5K, apartments, homes, and that's going to really help you out with any of those surprise things like a broken dishwasher, washer, dryer, a roof that's giving you a problem. 5K probably won't cover it if you have a bigger house. Of course, these numbers will have to increase depending on what your potential expenses are. That could easily be 6 to 10,000. And of course, things like vacations. So we're just going to call vacations, but you can have vacations. You can have several other envelopes, or you can, if you don't like to travel, you can do whatever you want to do. You may want to have one for your car. If you like to have a nice car, a special car, you might want to just be putting money away so you're not always going into debt for a car, or if you do, it's a very small amount and you can pay it off in 2 to 3 years, as opposed to like the 9 or 10 year programs that they like to put us on. So the car could be one of those things. And now if they give you 0 interest, doesn't really matter. You're not going to say no to that. But if they're not offering 0 interest, you want to be able to pay off as much of your car as you can, so you're paying less interest. That's kind of a no-brainer. Of course, if you put the cash in there and it's earning 4%, you're happy, because that's depending on the type of car. Now, if you're, like I said, going with specialty car, it's probably a fair bit of money you're storing in there. We can put envelopes in here for many different things. You want to buy a piano, and I'm talking a grand piano, right? Because if you're going to buy, well, I guess we should spell it right. If you're going to buy a piano, you're going to want the best one. So you're going to get a grand piano. Now, there are other good pianos that sound really good. If you can't afford a grand piano and you don't have one, of course, that might not be as high a number, right? So instead of 15 to 20 grand, I'm not sure what a grand piano is anymore, but I'm just using that example. You can, get a piano for a lot less money. And if that's something you want to learn, or maybe you want to learn the guitar, whatever type of thing you want to buy, this could be just different things you want to purchase that you don't want to use your credit card for, and you can have an envelope just for that kind of stuff. All right, so I hope you'll follow along in the budgeting series. That's my take on the envelopes. This is how I kind of use it and how I've got it set up. Similar, but let me know if you want to leave comments below. Tell me how you like to budget and how you save money, or let me know what kind of problems you're having. I'll make more videos and tell you how you can budget to best suit yourself.